by being careful, but no one can avoid old age and death. Then are we not privileged to know how to look at them? And then can't we mind a more important business than trying to think of them? Learn the art of switching off your mind to a more significant and important thing. This is how to control the mind. You cannot directly ask the mind to get controlled, and you cannot make the mind disciplined. Just as unless you give a useful piece of work to a boy, you cannot make the boy disciplined by asking him to sit down. You can bring him to perfect discipline by allowing him to do something which you are also doing. So, do the same thing with the mind. Let the mind be engaged in something more significant. The mind has got a peculiar quality which we call habit, which is more important than knowledge and wisdom. What we know is much weaker than what we are habituated to. Even the sentences in the Gospels, even the verses from the scriptures we meditate are helpless and powerless before our habits. We are gravitated to our habit, not to the sentence in the Gospel. Suppose I am habituated for a long time to hatred, disliking company of people and hating others. At the same time, on Sunday morning, I open the Gospel, and with a superstitious idea that it will give me salvation, I read the sentence, love thy neighbor as thyself. Does it in any way help me? Habit is stronger than scripture. Habit is stronger than gospel. Habit is stronger than God. Sometimes devil is more powerful than God. It can purchase us away from God for a long time. So, these people understood that there is a great quality to the mind which can be misused or used rightly. It is what we call habit. Make a habit of doing something. Direct the mind to get engaged in some significant work in its threefold activity of thought, word and deed. Observe yourself if you are thinking meaningfully or not. Is this thought necessary? Question yourself, is this thought conducive of goodness? Does this thought help anyone or myself? Gradually a transformation takes place. You will begin to think meaningfully and significantly. And while talking, grow a little bit more aware of your own conversation. Question yourself, is it a mere prattling activity? Is it a mere question-answer process? Or does it serve a valuable purpose of informing something, or explaining something, or making something understand? So, grow aware and question yourself. Then the process of talking minimizes. Talking becomes meaningful. Same thing doing also. We go to many places. Question yourself what for we are going. If it is to do something useful either to yourself or to others, this awareness regulates your deeds. Again observe if your talk insults anyone, if it disturbs anyone, if it shocks anyone. Gradually you will begin to speak pleasant, at the same time truthful. So the whole behavior becomes truthful and palatable to others. In the name of truth speaking, we need not insult anyone. We should understand that we have no right to insult anyone. This threefold discipline by applying, not by rejecting. A positive approach to discipline, not a negative approach. This is what is called tapas in Sanskrit. It can be to some extent translated as austerity. This is what is called observing a rhythm in our activity. And then the next process of observing rhythm is the art of breathing. what the ancient scientists called pranayama, what the Tibetan master Jwalkul explains as the art of breathing, and the art of uttering the sacred word Om. It is not enough if we utter it vocally. It should be uttered in the form of the utterance of our behavior, in the form of the utterance of our daily routine. Make your daily routine rhythmic. Establish following timings to your activity. Let as many items of your daily routine as possible be properly timed. Let us be able to do them at the same time, same hour, same minute, as many items of the daily routine as possible. At the same time, making the process natural, ourselves entering into the rhythm, without which the whole process becomes an imprisonment. Enforcing yourself into timings and program without entering into the spirit of the rhythm and music of life, it causes great tension and great harm to you. If you try to keep up timings with great pressure, the pressure has always an impact upon your brain and heart, and the energy centers get too much strained and congested. There will be a rush of energies to the heart center and head center, congestion of blood in the head and the heart, which creates gushes of emotion, which once again create the rush of blood to the heart and head. It is a vicious circle. The rush of blood creates emotional disturbance, for example, irritability and outbursts of anger. And the emotional disturbance once again creates the rush of blood to the head and heart. This is what is called destroying the rhythm that is there within us. This is not what is required. Re-establish rhythm in everything. Make it a child's play for you to be able to observe timings. When you are able to observe and maintain timings, be happy. When you are not able to observe, smile at yourself and be happy. Know the art of doing things. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna defines yoga as the skill of doing things. If some process is painful, then that means you are making a wrong approach to the process. When yoga practice is painful, that means your approach to yoga is wrong. When the practice of pranayama is choking and suffocating, then what you call pranayama is something wrong. So, Krishna warned in the Bhagavad Gita, see that if something is a joy that is not going to end, a pleasant mood which has a tendency to continue with you, that is a sure test of your being on the way of spiritualism. Some people grow too much serious in mind, thinking that they are growing spiritual. They think that a hearty laugh is not good. They believe a smile is not required in life, and they grow grim and spend all life as the whole life as a cemetery ceremony. That has nothing to do with spiritualism. Real spiritualist is always jolly and happy, always pleasant at the cost of no one. Remember, not at his own cost, nor at the cost of anyone. That is his precise attitude. So, then we are able to do it. When we are able to maintain precise timings to the hour and minute, by playing with time as children play with toys, then understand you are discovering the rhythm of life. You are re-establishing rhythm in life. The mind becomes rhythmic. Gradually, thoughts undergo transformation. They give comfort not only to you, but to those who are with you. Remember, your presence is a joy to others around you. This is one of the real tests of true spiritual practice. And then automatically pranayama occurs to you. When you begin to observe the movements of your own respiration daily, at the same time and at the same place, and from the other side, when you try to make your items of the day regular, then the center and circumference of your activity begin to feel the existence of each other. So you will grow more and more aware of the rhythm that is there within you in heart and lungs, and that is there around you in the form of the earth's rotation, in the form of sunset and sunrise, day and night, etc. So rhythm surrounds you. And gradually your daily process of observing your respiration becomes significant and meaningful. Then when the mind is free from fear, suspicion, anger, jealousy, possessive instinct, then the respiration is perfectly rhythmic. Then your mind begins to approach nearer and nearer your respiration. Great people from Shambhala begin to transmit messages to the hierarchy. That means the activity of your head center gradually begins to approach your heart center. And mind and the respiration come together and they become one. The mind disappears. You are present. Respiration stops. Then when the mind comes out, respiration is there once again. When the mind disappears, respiration is not there, it stops. This is what is called pranayama. We should not stop respiration, but respiration should stop. So pranayama is a process of re-establishing the once existing rhythm in us.
Innerhalb uns selbst.
It is a regulation of pulsations and not at all a stoppage of respiration. So we will find that we are masters of the rhythm. Then we begin to apply this mastery over everything. For the first time we discover that there is a twofold activity that is involved in this rhythm. A centripetal and a centrifugal activity. One traveling from the center to circumference and another traveling from circumference to center, which is causing inhalation and exhalation, which is causing the lub-dub of the heart, which is causing the distribution of blood and again recollection of blood into the, which is creating necessities for you to offer something to others and get something done from others, and the necessity to explain what you want to others, and the necessity to listen what others want from you, learning something from others. Every piece of activity in your life is twofold. It comes under the rhythm. These two types of activity is called prana and apana in Sanskrit. In the Bhagavad Gita it is prescribed that we should neutralize prana into the activities of apana and neutralize the activity of apana into the activity of prana. It means,
Das bedeutet,
just as the respiration is equalized, the attitude of your giving and taking should be equalized. An impersonal and joyful way of sharing should be practiced. The attitude to listen and learn and the attitude to speak out and teach should be neutralized by each other. This is what is called establishing the rhythm, a major part of spiritual practice. And then we will know something about ritual after a 5 minutes pause. What is ritual? How to ritualize life? If at all, is it necessary? If necessary, how is it necessary? Within the limits of time we have, let us try to understand this. All the activity in the world is of two types. One is how it takes place, and the other is how we do it. If we understand how it takes place in the world, then how we do will be in accordance. For example, when all of us are talking together in this hall, talking to each other in this hall, there is activity. And when all of us sit silent and ask one among us to explain something, any one of us can do it. Before that, what is to be done? A silence is to be established. How we do it, please observe. Suppose every one of us ask others to keep silence. There is everything except silence. That is how we make activity, but how nature does is different. The more we try to establish, let us keep silence and ask each other to keep silence, the less will be the silence that is established. So there is an inversion of activity and intention. The more we try to achieve something, the more will be the activity and the less we achieve. So there is some keynote which we are missing, which we can get it by observing nature. What is it that we do? If we want to have silence, we are silent. That is different from shouting each other that we should be silent. The same type of difference exists between the activity of this creation and the activity we create. Until we know the difference and until we know the secret of how nature works silently, whatever activity we create will be a big waste of energy and time. We will be exerting ourselves to achieve something, and the more and more we exert, the result is exertion and not achievement. Now, a spiritualist is on his way to spirit from matter, just feeling the existence of a rhythm within and around himself, and then feeling the comfort and happiness of that rhythm, and then feeling the desirability and the positive nature of that rhythm, and developing a taste for that rhythm, establishing a habit of experiencing that rhythm. When one's habit is established, nothing can disturb us.
Stören.
Remember, even gospel cannot disturb us. Gospel. But after establishing this rhythm, gospel can help us. Every sentence and every word of the gospel can help us.
Und jedes Wort im Evangelium kann uns dann helfen.
Just as previously no sentence of the gospel could help us, now after establishing ourselves in the rhythm, no disturbance around you will disturb you. That is what is required. No disturbance could disturb you means that you have no disturbance in this world. That means, in fact, there is no disturbance in the world. When it existed only in us, not in the world. This fact will be very well established in us. For example, when we started our conference here, there was music being heard from the theater. Suppose we begin to grow impatient of the music, what happens? That means we are growing more attentive to the music than to our own work. Growing impatient towards something means growing more aware of its existence. So half of it will be neutralized by establishing a habit in the rhythm. And then for a fellow who has known enough the taste of rhythm, no other thing tastes him. And all his activity undergoes a transformation. Previously, we will be doing many things. After the rhythm has been established, there is nothing we have to do in this world at all. Does that mean that we close our hands and feet and sleep? No. We should know the subtle meaning and intention of the scripture writers. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I have no reason to come to you and to help you. I am not employed by you and I have no obligation. That's the reason why I continue to do it. Can we understand the logic of it? When we are paid to do something, we have an obligation to do something. That is what is called obligation. We must do. No other go, we have to do. That, no other go, no other
Also es
alternative.
gibt,
That means we do that much only and then stop. But when we want to do something to our child, who is paying us for it? If an young man brings some present to his wife or some sweet thing on birthday, who is paying the fellow to bring it? Is he employed to bring a birthday presentation to his wife? The motivation is different. When the motivation stops to be an obligation, the behavior of an untrained fellow is different from the behavior of a trained fellow. When there is no obligation for an untrained fellow, he stops doing anything to any help to anyone because he is under no obligation to any fellow. Until he is forced to do something by way of compulsion or necessity, the fellow is not inclined to do anything at all. See how the laborer and the fellow who is addicted to alcohol 24 hours, when he earns money enough for 4 days to drink, stops doing his work for 3 days, drinks and sleeps. That is the attitude of the untrained fellow when he has no need or obligation to do something to others. But for a fellow who has known how to establish himself in rhythm, to him life is a music. He cannot be without. Then he goes on doing something for others. You ask him why you do this. The answer is what Lord Krishna, I go on doing it. I have no business to stop it because I am not at all in obligation with anybody to do it. We are expected to know the logic behind this statement. It is a very subtle and peculiar logic. On the surface of it, it appears illogical. But when you stop and begin to think, immediately you will feel the rhythm within yourself and around yourself. And will understand that this activity is different from the obligatory activity. You can be doing the same work, you need not change the type of work also. But the spirit of doing the work is different. The remuneration follows. That is, the result seeks you and follows you. Whereas in the case of obligatory activity, we seek the benefit, and in the activity which is not obligatory, the benefit seeks you and follows you.